Welcome to Husband Talking. Explore riveting tales of infidelity with us. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin.
In many important events, it is often the small details that can determine their success or failure. In 1993, the Discovery space shuttle was lost because of a cheap gasket that likely cost only a few dollars. As a result, 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars were lost. It is often said that a blood clot, which can be so tiny that it requires a microscope to see, can lead to someone's death. When blood flow to a vital area of the brain is blocked, a life can end because of a microscopic piece of sticky cells. A small patch of black ice on a dry road can send a car spinning out of control, leading to a crash. The wheel turns, control is lost on a sharp curve, and a fatal outcome can follow. This can go on indefinitely. A tiny thing, often invisible, can ruin a major project. But think about it, can we consider a marriage a major project? I believe so. I view my marriage as a significant endeavor. I've been married for just over 9 years to a wonderful woman named Laura. We have 2 great sons, Ryan and Josh. Ryan carries my name. Ryan Jr. Josh is named after my father. We reside in a lovely house, one that has space enough for a growing family. I haven't graduated from college, but I have a good job as a master mechanic. My skills have provided us with a decent living. I work long hours, but the income makes it worthwhile. I have always seen my marriage as the highlight of my life. I put in a lot of effort to support my family. I regarded it as a significant project and approached it earnestly. What caused my marriage to falter was a small thing. For me, it was a tiny blood vessel in my brain that was too close to another vessel, and sometimes, under certain conditions, the vessel would expand and touch the other one. This resulted in a migraine headache. I experienced one on that unfortunate day. Mine had classic symptoms. Light hurt, sounds were amplified, and smells were unbearable. It hit me suddenly and unexpectedly, a blinding pain that caught me off guard. I recognized it right away. The issue was that I didn't have my sumatriptan inhaler with me, so I couldn't stop or lessen the pain. The pills I had with me weren't as effective as the inhaler, and it would take a while to ease the pain to a manageable level. I couldn't work anyway. I stumbled in to see my boss and broke the bad news. He was alarmed by my distress and called his secretary to take me home. Well, it's nearly quitting time, so he doesn't need to worry about hours. Just clock him out and give me his card, and don't let him drive for God's sake. Go now. Emily helped me get to my feet, and she and my boss carefully guided me out the door and down the hall to the exit. Emily led me outside and helped me lean against the wall while she went to get her car. I couldn't handle the light, so I kept my eyes shut and pressed my hands to my temples, pushing as hard as I could to help block the pain. Once in the car, I leaned back against the seat and tried to shut everything out. The pain was intense and worsening. I could barely see, the light forcing me to tightly close my eyes. The sounds were now just a deep thudding in my head, and the smell was revolting, making my stomach churn. Since Emily knew where I lived, I didn't have to say or do anything while she drove. It felt like it took forever, but eventually, she stopped the car, got out, opened my door, and helped me out. I followed her, doing my best. Emily got me inside and assisted me to the kitchen, where I asked her to open the refrigerator and grab the injector. She found it, handed it to me, and supported me while I put it in my nose and pressed the plunger. I inhaled at the same time, taking the spray into my lungs and quickly into my bloodstream. I had her lead me into the family room off the kitchen and help me lie down on the couch. I asked her to close all the blinds and turn off any lights. She did this, waited a few minutes until I told her that I felt some relief starting, and then she left. I thanked her for getting me home and welcomed the silence once she was gone. I must have dozed off quickly once the pain began to fade because I woke up later to voices. It was very dark in the room, so I knew it was later in the day. As I remembered where I was, I quickly realized that the pain had disappeared. I felt as though I had been beaten around my neck and shoulders, but that was just the aftereffects of the migraine. I slowly sat up and paused for a moment to make sure the pain wasn't just hiding, waiting to strike again. It was gone, thank God. I sat there in the dark, recognizing the voices of my wife, Laura, and her friend, Rachel, from next door. I guess they didn't know I was there since it was dark and the lights were still off. Maybe Laura had just let me sleep, thinking I might have come home early. But no, my car wasn't in the driveway. She probably didn't even think I was home. Perhaps I would surprise both of them. I stood up, ready to tiptoe over to the doorway, and then jump out when I began to focus on what they were saying. Come on, Laura, how was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl. It was fantastic. I felt like I was in heaven. He was even better this time than he was before. I swear, I must have climaxed 3 times before he came. God, it was almost mind-blowing. It was the best sex I've ever had. Even better than Ryan? Better than your husband? Hell yes, I love Ryan to death. But he's never made me feel like that. Never. Of course, I never let him do those things to me either. He'd think I was a real 304 if I did. But David must think you're a 304 then? Of course. But I'm his 304 and I love it. God, I can't wait until the next time. Aren't you afraid of Ryan finding out? What would he do? Have you thought about that? You're risking a lot, you know. Ryan will never find out, and even if he did, so what? He won't do anything about it. He's a sweetheart and he would forgive me. He would never divorce me and take a chance on losing his kids. He loves those kids and he knows I would take them away from him in a heartbeat. All I'd need would be a cutthroat lawyer and he'd be toast. This doesn't sound like you, Laura. I've never heard you talk that way about Ryan. How could you say you love him when you talk that way? You scare me, girl. I think you're making a huge mistake. I love Ryan, I really do. But I don't want to stop what I have with David either. I want both. I want the sex I get with David and the love I get with Ryan. I need both and I won't give it up. I had heard enough. My migraine was gone. But the pain in my heart was worse by far. The pain was so intense that my stomach tightened and my breath left me gasping. I heard a ringing in my ears and my blood was pounding in my head. I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack and held on to the jamb of the doorway until I could feel my body begin to return to some degree of normal. I still hadn't let them know I was there. But as my control returned, the anger inside me grew in intensity until I felt ready to explode. I straightened up, raised my head, and walked into the kitchen light. There was a sudden silence when Rachel saw me first. She looked up, stopped talking while her eyes widened and her mouth opened into a shocked O. Her hand flew to her mouth and she let out a soft, "Oh my God." Laura turned to see what she was looking at and saw me standing there. Her face went from satisfied to surprised to fear and then to anger, all in a flash. She pushed back her chair and stood, turning to face me. "How much did you hear? Why in the hell were you lurking in there and spying on me?" I just looked at her without speaking. My eyes shifted to Rachel, who immediately rose and said, "I have to go. Alex and I will keep the boys unless you come over to get them. They'll call you later." With that, she almost ran out the side door. I watched her go without a word. Once she was gone, I looked back at Laura, considering that this was the woman I had loved without question for the last 9 years of my life. 9 years that were the happiest I had ever known. I had expected that we would be together for the rest of our days. But now that expectation was shattered. There would be no forever for us, no growing old together. Laura had killed that tonight. Where are the boys? What did you do with them while you screwed your lover? Did you take care of them, or was it too much fun just to have another man effing you that you let them alone? I was now calm and cold. The pain was still there, deep cutting pain. It was going to be a long time before that pain lessened. There would be days and days of pain so intense that it was going to tax all I had. Laura had a look of anger on her face that turned her beauty into an ugly mask. Maybe the mask was the real Laura. Maybe this was the Laura I had never seen but who had been inside all along. She lashed back. "The boys are with Emily. Rachel and I were out shopping and Alex was sitting for me. I wasn't with anyone else, just Rachel." With this announcement, she felt she had scored a point. The look of anger changed into a look of satisfaction. She finally realized that I had been home all along and asked, "What are you doing home? Where is your car? And why were you sitting there in the dark? Were you spying on me, trying to catch me in something?" I came home early with a severe migraine. John had Emily drive me home since I couldn't stand the light. I took my sumatriptan and fell asleep. I've been there ever since. I felt a tremor in my stomach and the unmistakable urge to vomit took me. I rose and continued as I started to the bathroom. Your voices woke me, and what I heard made me sick. I need to use the bathroom, so if you'll excuse me. With that, I ran to the bathroom and tried to heave my stomach through my mouth. It wasn't successful, but my body certainly tried. I sat there on the bathroom floor, my face pressed against the cool porcelain as my body slowly relented. My stomach finally stopped its rebellion and my breathing returned to normal. The sweat dried on my face as the urge dissipated. I sat there for a few more minutes before getting up, splashing some water on my face and using more to rinse my mouth. Once the shaking stopped and I felt under some control, I walked back to the kitchen where Laura sat staring out the window. I'm going to get the boys. They'll put them to bed tonight. I walked past her and out the door, going next door to the Carters. Alex and Rachel Carter were our neighbors and best friends. We spent many an evening on each other's decks talking and sharing drinks. Good friends, I thought. I wonder what Alex knew. I had to ask. I walked up the steps to their back door, knocked once and walked in. Rachel was sitting in her kitchen with a cup of coffee in front of her, talking with her husband. It seemed she had told him. He glanced up as I entered with a look of pity on his face. Rachel just looked scared. Came to get the boys. Are they ready to go home? I was already moving past Alex to the family room where I assumed the boys were playing with Emily, their teenage daughter. I saw them working on a puzzle together with Emily watching over them. She smiled at me as I entered the room and stood. Hi, Mr. Marshall. Did you come to get them? And I nodded, she said. They'll get their jackets. I stood watching them, a feeling of sadness overwhelming me. Scenes like this were, I imagined all the little everyday pleasures that consisted of family were forever changed, shattered by the inconceivable selfishness of one or the other of the adults, shattered beyond repair in most cases. This seemed one of those. Thanks, Emily. They'll be in the kitchen when they're ready. I walked back to the kitchen where Alex and Rachel continued to sit. I looked at Rachel and then at Alex. Did you both know? Did you know that she was cheating on me? Was it a turn-on knowing what you knew when we were together? Did it give you some sort of sick thrill? I was angry and my words were unnecessarily harsh. But I wanted to know. I wanted to know what my dear friends knew. I had to know. Alex looked at Rachel, the anger clear on her face before answering me. I didn't know, buddy. I swear to you if I had, I would have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and hid it from me. That was really low, damn low. You didn't deserve that. I apologize for my wife, but if you need me, I'm here. Alex was staring at his wife, a look of anger on his face. I believed him. I did. He would have told me if he knew. So it was Rachel and Laura's secret then. I have you to thank, Rachel. Thank you for letting me become a joke, a cuckold, a wimp husband that didn't need to know his wife was screwing another guy. Hope it makes you feel good knowing what you knew, thinking of me when she gave you the details. I turned when I saw Emily out of the corner of my eye. I quickly put a smile on my face as the boys came out, each with a cookie in his hand. I prayed she hadn't heard my last comments, and from the look on her face, knew she hadn't. I commented on the cookies the boys had as I herded them out the door for home. I followed them out without a look back. That would be the last time Rachel would ever be with my boys. I would make that a goal. I didn't know how, but I would try. We entered the house through the back door where the boys ran upstairs to their room to change for dinner. I moved through the empty kitchen and into the family room where Laura was sitting. She hadn't turned on any lights, sitting in the dark as I had done while I listened to the end of my life. I walked in, turned on the light on the table beside the couch, and opened the curtains to allow the dwindling daylight inside. All I succeeded in making was a room filled with shadows, dark corners symbolizing the hidden secrets my loving wife held. Laura looked terrible. Her eyes were red, still glazed with tears. Her face was pale and drawn, her shoulders hunched. All the anger and belligerence had fled, and now she was the frightened woman that I would have expected. It was a little late for this, however, and instead of filling me with hope, I was disgusted. Now she was contrite, now she was frightened. I couldn't accept that much of a change in just 10 minutes. No, this was the first salvo in the battle for supremacy. This was the cheating wife that kept secrets and hid her infidelity from me. This face was one of deception and cunning, not regret. I looked at her and asked the first question that came to mind. Who is he? What does he have that I don't? She just stared at me without answering until I was sure she wasn't going to say anything. I was about to turn to leave when she finally spoke. Who he is isn't important and it has nothing to do with you, Ryan. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. I never meant for you to know. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I'm so sorry you heard what I said to Rachel. You have to understand, you have to. Funny, no, I'm sorry. I did it. No, I wish it had never happened. No, ITLL never happen again. Just sorry I got caught and you had to find out. I shook my head as I sank into the soft recliner she had bought me for our 5th anniversary. I loved it. Please, you have to let me explain this to you. It doesn't have to be the end of us. We can go on just as before. We can if you'll just try to understand. Will you? She looked at me with a pleading expression, one I had seen before when she wanted something I disagreed with. Laura, can you tell me it's over? Can you promise me you'll never see him again or be with him again? Is it done? I kept my voice still, my body rigid, my hands holding the arms of my chair, gripping, holding me in control. Laura looked at me with her eyes wide open, tears welling up to flow down her cheeks. She didn't answer me. That was enough for me. She wouldn't stop. I heard her words to Rachel. She wanted both, and she wasn't going to let me get in her way. She wasn't going to give him up. She wanted me to accept. I guess that's your answer. They'll put the boys to bed after dinner, and then we can discuss our options. They'll move my things out of the house tomorrow. I guess they'll stay with my brother at his place. I rose and walked out of the room into the kitchen. Funny how the kitchen becomes the place to go when things get really bad. Wonder why. Strange thought to have when your world is falling apart. Stranger things still to know that your world is falling apart. Laura went about fixing dinner for us while I took the boys down to the playroom and spent an hour or so with them, just enjoying. We were playing with one of their games when Laura called us for dinner. We trooped upstairs with lots of noise, and I pushed the boys toward the bathroom to wash their hands. Routine things, holding it together for their sakes. Dinner was a strained meal that night. The boys were their usual boisterous selves, enjoying each other, nothing on their plates, and life in general compared to their parents, who sat quietly, each in their own private world, thinking about consequences and decisions that had to be made. Ah, the joys of growing up and leaving childhood behind. Why do children always want to grow up? Little do they know. They see the freedom adults have and think it is unrestricted. They see decisions to be made and see no consequences to making them. They see the independence adults have and relate that to a lack of rules. Adults know better. Then again, some don't. Some see freedom as unrestricted, with no consequences for their decisions and no respect for rules. Like Laura. After dinner, Laura did the dishes in the kitchen while I took the boys upstairs to bed. We talked, read a couple of stories, and enjoyed each other for an hour until they finally gave up the fight and let me put them down. I walked to the door of their room, dimmed the light, and watched them as they pulled the covers up to their necks and prepared to enter that dreamland where possibilities were endless and new discoveries awaited. My eyes burned and my throat closed up with grief as I watched. This too would end. Downstairs, I sat in my chair and tried to find something to hold on to. It seemed that my world was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had loved Laura with all my heart, but I couldn't forget the words I heard as I stood there in the dark, listening. Those words, he's never made me feel like that, and in his 304. No, there was no way back from those words. I felt the love inside me die as I tried to consider all the possibilities. Laura walked in and sat down. We have to talk. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. What I have with David is just sex and the excitement of something new. I know it will pass quickly, but right now I can't stop seeing him. It is something that has a hold on me and I can't give it up. But it hasn't affected how I feel about you. I love you, not him. He's just a distraction, nothing more. It will end soon and we can get back to the way we were. You just have to let this happen. The words were flowing, but I was not able to comprehend what she was saying. I can't give it up. I can't stop seeing him. I have to let this happen. Was she crazy or just deluded? Whatever, this was gonna stop now. I'm sorry, but you're the one that apparently doesn't understand. There is no us. There is no we. There is only you and him. That's all there is now. You and I are done, finished, over. There is no discussion, and I could never understand. You have to know that after being married to me for the past 9 years, you couldn't know me so little as to believe I would accept your affair. But Ryan, I love you. I do. You are the only man I've ever loved. I don't love David. I don't. Please try to understand. Give me this time. Please, baby, for our marriage and our family. Give me this time. Take all the time you want. They'll contact an attorney tomorrow and we'll divide everything evenly. I have no desire to hurt you as you've hurt me. I just want it over. I was emotionally drained now, and I just wanted to go to bed and forget for a while. My headache was a thing of the past, but the ache in my heart was real, and I just wanted oblivion for a few hours. But I wasn't prepared for what followed. Damn you then. No divorce. He'll fight you every step of the way, and he'll take everything you have. He'll make certain you won't get custody of the boys, and he'll restrict your visitation rights every way I can. If you want to allow me this time for myself, it is going to cost you everything. And he'll still have David. You can't stop me. You know it. I listened to this, hearing, and it came to me then that this marriage had been over for some time. This degree of anger and disrespect wasn't sudden. It was planned and well thought out. She never worried about hurting me. If she had, she would never have done this in the first place. She would have ended it before it started. Instead, she had anticipated my finding out, and rather than stop her affair, she decided on hurting me as much as possible. There was no love here, only avarice and the desire to humiliate me. I watched her as the anger grew in me. I know my face showed her that she had gone too far. Her countenance, twisted by the venom in her words, turned from one of satisfaction to one of fear. My words lashed out then. I only have one thing to say to you, Laura. When you push a rat into a corner, hell turn on you. Hell fight to the death when you try to take away any chance of escape. You should have remembered that before you pushed me. But now you have, and you will pay the price. Please, Ryan. I don't want to do this, but I have no choice. I love you and I'll do anything I can to stop you from walking out on us. If you want, try to understand and accept that. I'll fight you. You'll have no choice but to give up and stay with me. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you, Ryan. You'll stay. Goodbye, Laura. Tell the boys I'll see them when I can. They'll just get a few things and then they'll leave. They'll get the rest of my stuff later when we can arrange a time. I went upstairs and quickly packed a bag with enough to last me for a day or so. Nothing much, just my things from the bathroom and a few pairs of underwear and some jeans and socks. Not much after 9 years of marriage, just bitter memories now. But I did have 2 wonderful sons, and that was all I cared about now. I came back down to see Laura sitting in the kitchen by the door. She was apparently going to give it one more try. Ryan, please don't do this. I'm begging you, don't. Tell me you're through with him. You'll never see him again. Just tell me that and maybe we have a chance. I can't. I just can't. Please. I pushed her aside. I felt the urge to slap her as hard as I could, but I knew the anger inside would not be so easily controlled, so I held back. He'll stop in the evenings after work so the boys won't notice anything right away. I opened the door and left. The door slammed behind me as I threw my bag in the back and climbed into my truck. I backed out of the garage and drove away. On the way, I pulled out my cell and called Chris, my brother. He lived about 15 miles away in a small subdivision. He lived alone since his wife ran off with a friend of his 3 years ago, and Chris had no idea where she was. He didn't much care anymore, but he was too lazy to do anything about it. They had never divorced, but Chris didn't let that stop him. He was a real boozer now and was usually out with his guys drinking most nights. He and I had words about that, but Chris wouldn't stop. I had to admit he was rarely drunk, just buzzed most of the time. I think he was burying the memories, but that was just my opinion. He answered, heard me ask him for a place to stay, and told me to make myself at home. He'd be back sometime later. Not to worry. So I drove to his place, took the key from under the planter on the porch, and went inside. As always, it looked like no one lived there. Chris was a lot of things, but he wasn't a slob. As a matter of fact, he was compulsively neat. He had always been that way. It was a comforting thing to see now. Things were as they always were. It was just my life that was screwed up. I checked the fridge, found a few beers, and made myself at home, as he suggested. By the time he got back, I was pleasantly buzzed. I had gone to the store for more beer and had consumed half of them when he got home. I just told Chris that Laura and I were having a fight, and all Chris said was, well, shit, bro. I guess that summed it up pretty much. To help me out, he sat down and started to drink the remaining beer, just to keep me from getting too far under. I was his brother, he told me, always there for me. I woke the next morning with a serious hangover and a raging headache. It was my own fault. Drinking that way, even though I had reason, was no excuse. I staggered into the bathroom and stood under the shower, letting the cold water shock away the last dregs of the alcohol in my bloodstream. No good staying drunk. I looked for Chris and found a note saying he was at work and he would report me off. Not surprising since we were scheduled to work that Saturday. Chris and I worked at the same place, a company that leased and rented heavy construction equipment for most of the large contractors. Customers came from all over the state for their equipment, and we were two of the top mechanics. It was our job to keep the rigs running regardless of the problems. It was good money and long hours, but it paid for the things that I expected to provide for my family. That was my job, to provide. So I had to work. I knew I had to continue to make the money that Laura used to maintain that big house she was so proud of. I believed that she saw it as I did, a home for us and security for our family. I had been proud of that. My way to provide, my way to honor and cherish my family. That wasn't the case, as she told me last night. Laura thought of it differently. It was her security, all right, but she also saw it as an asset to hold over my head in any divorce. She wanted the house and the money I made, but only to buy beautiful clothes for her lover, for trips to Victoria's Secret for lingerie for her lover. I increased the flow of water to drown out those thoughts. Even though I was late, I had to get out of here and go to work, where I could think, plan, decide things I couldn't do now. Things that Laura had already thought about. It was clear from what she said last night that she had planned this in advance, knowing I would be reeling from the shock of her betrayal once I found out. She knew I wouldn't be thinking clearly then, so she had it all planned out. Hit me with the divorce strategy of taking me for everything. Make it about hurting the kids. Make it my fault if I didn't approve of my wife screwing another man. Make me the bad guy. She had stacked the deck all right. Stacked it against me to force me to allow her to screw another man. She thought she was smart. She had a good thing, and she wasn't going to lose it to her jealous husband. I dressed and got a box of extra-large trash bags. I knew she would be gone this morning, taking the boys to her mother's place. They were planning a birthday party for the boys' 6th birthday. I drove over to the house and let myself in. I took everything out of my closet and drawers and threw it into several large garbage bags. I got all of the things out of the bathroom that I would need, put that into a small overnight bag, and took that and the bags out to my truck. I heaved everything into the back and then went back into the house. I wasn't going to leave just yet. I was coming home after work, and I would spend some time with the children. I had a lot to think about and a lot to decide. One thing was certain: my marriage was over, and I would never touch Laura again. Never again would she be my wife, my lover, or my confidant. She was someone else's lover now, not mine. As I thought of that, I couldn't stop the tears that started, and I sat there on the floor of what used to be our bedroom and cried. Loss is hard. At work, I dove in and worked straight through breaks and lunch hour. I was happy to bury all thought of home and wife and kids under the demands of fuel injectors, drive chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled broken drive gears and hydraulic lifts, anything that challenged me. I worked on the toughest jobs without complaint. I was like a man possessed and was still at it 10 hours later when Chris tapped me on the shoulder for a break. "Hey man, come on, Jesus, take a break, will you? You're making the rest of us look like lazy bastards." He stood there waiting till I stopped, a dazed look on my face. "Sorry man, just working to bury myself in this. Don't mean to shame anyone. Sorry." I must have looked as if I was about to burst into tears when Chris took me by the elbow and led me off the floor and into the break area. Chris and I had been tight since our father and mother died in a car accident 12 years ago. Chris was the best man at my wedding 9 years ago. Chris was godfather to my boys, Ryan Jr. and Josh. I sat down and stared at the table as Chris got us both a cup of hot coffee. It wasn't good coffee, but it was hot. "Okay, talk to me. Tell me the whole story and don't leave anything out. Start talking." I started talking and didn't stop for the next 10 minutes. I told Chris everything. All the shame, the humiliation, the contempt Laura showed me, and I even told him of the threat she laid out. The one she had planned to keep me from doing anything to spoil her screwfest. She was trying to make it impossible for me to do anything to stop her or to get back at her without giving up everything. She had done it willingly, and now she wanted me to accept it. I told Chris of the look on her face as she humiliated me, as she told Rachel of the sex and how wonderful it was, the contempt on her face when she threatened me with taking it all away from me. She made it clear that her lover was too important for her to give him up. Chris was shocked. He knew Laura well, had always thought of her as a good woman and a good mother. I had never hinted at any problems between us, and he assumed our marriage was strong. Now this. Chris looked at his brother and saw the pain and the suffering he was feeling. It hurt just to see it. Ryan was a good man, a solid father, a great provider, and under it all, someone the guys around the garage knew they could always trust to be there for them. He had helped more than his share over the years. Chris began to become angry. How could she do this to him? What the hell was wrong with her? His anger began to grow as he looked at his brother and best friend, broken and beaten. Ryan, listen to me. You're not going to take this, are you? You have to do something. Let me and the guys help you. This can't stand. He was looking at me with concern etched on his face. Concern for me, I knew. I looked up with a hopeless expression on my face. What can I do? She'll take it all. If I divorce her, child support, alimony, the house, the car, everything. You know, I would never take anything away from my kids. She's using the kids as a weapon against me. She knows I won't hurt them, and probably so does that prick she's screwing. He's a bastard who thinks screwing another man's wife is fine. They've got me by the balls and Loris doing the squeezing. Chris shook his head and growled. Screw them both. You know I loved Laura like my own sister, but now she's made her bed and she'll have to lie in it. We have to go after them both. The first thing we have to do is find out who he is. That's the easy part. Let me make a couple of calls. Then we can talk. I just shrugged my shoulders. Okay, but I don't know what you think I can do. She won't tell me anything about him. So what? Well, find him and hell go down just like anyone else. And you know you can never take Laura back. Don't you? What she did makes that impossible. She'll castrate you if you accept what she's doing. She'll never have any respect for you again. No way, man. She's another man's 304 now. I was surprised for a second, but then a small smile started. You're right. She's no longer my loving wife. I learned last night how quickly love can turn to hate, and my hate for her is stronger today than my love for her last night. She took that from me and twisted it into something that is going to come back to hurt her. I told her that. We talked a while longer, clocked out without any overtime, and went to a small bar close to work. Neither of us planned on getting drunk. This was business and plans had to be made. Chris called a few others in and we sat around a table and plotted. I was amazed at the support I received from these, my friends. They asked no questions, just wanted to know what they could do to help. This was the loyalty I thought I had with my wife, but that was a lie. Together, we plotted and came up with a workable plan. At 8 that evening, I pulled into my drive and went into my house. Funny, I thought as I walked in, it was no longer home. It was just a house. I walked into the kitchen, took my jacket off, and walked into the family room. There, I saw Laura sitting in her chair, watching Ryan and Josh, our 6-year-old twins, playing a video game. I stood there, locking this picture in my mind forever. It was not going to be this way any longer. I looked at Laura. She had been watching me as I looked at the kids. She had a small smile on her face, a smile I now understood. It showed her contempt for me and her contempt for this whole wholesome scene. It was all a lie, a huge lie, with her as the liar. Now I could see and understand. I returned her look, but not the smile. As I turned away, she looked down. I walked out to the kitchen and looked in the refrigerator. I grabbed what looked like leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes and put them in the microwave to reheat. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to be doing something. I had planned to talk to the boys just before they went to bed, but Chris had talked me out of it. I had to delay it now, but when I spoke to them, it would be the first step in the battle that was beginning with Laura. I would lose, no doubt, but I would go down fighting. I sat down with my plate and began to slowly eat. Nothing tasted good, but it was necessary to maintain my strength. I needed my wits about me. I had gotten about halfway through when Laura walked in and sat down across from me. I glanced up at her but returned to my plate and continued to eat, methodically chewing slowly. I said nothing. I had nothing to say to her yet. Have you come down from last night? Can we talk like civilized adults now? I looked up at her in surprise. Civilized adults? How about a cheating 304 and her cuck husband? That was more realistic. Instead of that, I chose to say nothing. Aren't you going to talk to me now? Are you going to be childish and give me the silent treatment? I thought better of you than that, Ryan. We have to think of the children now, so you have to remember your place in this house as their father. Am I really their father? Makes me wonder now. Maybe I should verify that with some tests. Nothing more than that, no anger, just a simple statement. Laura's face clouded over with anger, and she was about to say something when I simply said, "Careful, Laura. The children will hear you if you start to yell. You remember the children, the ones you accused me of forgetting about last night when I got angry. Well, now you have to remember. You have to think about what you have done to their world. You not only screwed another guy, you screwed away this family. Think carefully, Laura." Laura stopped, lowered her voice, and hissed, "It seems you haven't thought much about what I said last night. I expect you to get over this and get back to normal. Nothing will be different here at home. I still love you and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will be deprived of a single thing. I keep my activities private and only when they are in school and not around. You need not lose anything since I am always here for you." I didn't answer or respond. I simply continued to eat, chewing slowly and methodically. I kept my face bland and unresponsive. My eyes were blank as I looked at her. As I did, I felt nothing inside. Interesting that my words meant nothing, but my eyes told her everything. That began to slowly get through to Laura as she sat there. For the first time, I could see a single shiver of fear go through her. "What are you going to do? Are you going to make this difficult for me? I hoped that you loved me enough to let me have this time for myself. I told you last night he hasn't taken anything from you and that I would always be here for you. Why can't you understand that?" Laura was becoming emotional now while I simply stared at her, slowly chewing my food. I finally swallowed and said, "I think you should wait for this discussion until the children are in bed. I listened to you last night while you said your piece. I didn't like it, but I listened. Afterwards, I behaved badly and I apologize for that. I should have stayed. I'm sorry for leaving that way, but I will not have this discussion while the children are still up." Laura seemed mollified by that and began to smile again. "Thank you for that. I accept your apology. I think you were justified in some of what you said, but you hurt me with your words. They'll take the boys up soon and then we can talk." She walked past me with a hand on my shoulder. I flinched at her touch and she jerked her hand away. I couldn't stop the revulsion I felt from that simple touch. I went in to be with the kids and tried to be my normal self. It was hard knowing it was all going to change, but I accepted that Laura's actions had destroyed all of this for me. Maybe I should just be a good man and accept her terms, wait it out till she was done with the other man. After all, didn't she say she still loved me and wanted to stay married to me? But I knew I couldn't do that. Not now, not ever again. It was after 9 when Laura came into the family room where I was sitting. She heaved a sigh, lowered herself into her chair, and smiled. "Got them down and asleep. They're getting almost too big to put to bed now. They say they go to sleep, but I know they turn the light on after I leave to read. They're good boys." I looked at her and nodded my head in agreement. "They're good kids. It's too bad that this is going to be so hard on them, but I don't know how to spare them the pain they are going to go through." "What do you mean? I thought you understood that there is no need to do anything. Just let me have this time for myself, and then we can go back to being a family like we were. Just be patient. I told you it will be over soon. You will have lost nothing. I love you so much and I want to remain as your wife. This is just something that I have to do, nothing more." I looked at this woman who had been my wife for the past 9 years. I married her because I couldn't think of my life without her. We had 2 great kids and a good marriage up until last night. Now it had all changed, and she couldn't understand why I felt it had to. Well, I was not going to go into much tonight, but I had to set the record straight. "Laura, I listened to you last night. You made your case. You said you love me and want to be my wife. You say he is taking nothing from me. You won't tell me who he is because you say it is none of my business, and you told me what would happen if I tried to divorce you. You made it very clear that you would take everything from me without remorse. You said you would take everything from me, including my boys. You were very clear in that." Laura was listening, but there was a look of anger on her face. She wasn't pleased with my summation of her words, true as they were. It sounded different coming from me, but she saw the truth in what I said. "I don't believe that you see it the same way I do, Ryan. I told you it is totally separate from our marriage, but you wouldn't listen. Why can't you believe me when I say I still love you and want our marriage to continue? What I heard from you last night, Laura, was contempt. Contempt for me and for our marriage. When I got angry, you responded with threats that you had thought through before you spoke to me. Contempt for me, for everything I have done for us over the years. You humiliate me, denigrate me, threaten me, and blame me for not understanding. You knew perfectly well that I would react the way I did. Why do you think you had already decided how to deal with me? Why did you think you had all of the answers ready to lay out for me? Now I was becoming angry. Up till now, I had been calm and controlled, but it was slowly slipping away. Laura's angry face was all the encouragement I needed. I concluded one thing you forgot last night, Laura. When you made your threats and pushed me into a corner you thought I couldn't find a way out of. I told you then, and I'll remind you now, even a rat will fight the cat when he's backed into a corner and has nothing to lose. With that comment, I rose and began to walk away. When I reached the door of the kitchen where Laura sat, I stopped. I'm going to be staying somewhere else at night for a while. They'll come home after work so the children don't notice anything right away. What do you mean you're staying somewhere else? Why aren't you staying here? We can't work this out if you're gone. Ryan, don't do this. I really do love you and I don't want to lose you. I don't know what it'll do if you leave me. Please, Ryan, let's try to work this out. There has to be some way to make this work. I'm sorry, Laura. The one thing I do know right now is that I no longer love you. You were successful in your infidelity, and you killed any love I had for you last night. That's the only thing I know for sure. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I do know that there is no going back now. Ryan, what about your vows to love and cherish me? Can you walk away from that? Can you? I also remember your promises to me. You promised on our wedding day to forsake all others, but you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you gave what we shared to him. I provided for you, loved you, honored our marriage vows, and gave you all I had. It wasn't enough. You gave what was mine to someone else. You gave it away and destroyed my love in the process. So yes, I can walk away from that. You destroyed it and left it in tatters. I can walk away and I will. Just not yet. I left and drove to Chris' place. He agreed to let me stay there as long as I wished. I needed some time to finish what we had started. Soon it would be over and I would begin my new life. For the next few days, I worked and spent time in the evening with my kids, but said nothing more to Laura. She tried several times to talk to me, but each time I walked away. On one occasion, she screamed at me, but I simply grabbed my keys and left without a word. At work, during the break, one of the gang came in to tell Chris that things were in place and they should have something within a few days. All we had to do now was wait, just be patient. Nothing changed until the following week. I came home each night to an increasingly nervous Laura. The kids hadn't seemed to notice anything different, but Josh did ask if I was working a lot more. When I asked him what he meant, he said he only saw his daddy for a short time in the evening. I assured him we would do something that weekend. Josh seemed to accept that, and the small crisis passed. Laura continued to ask me questions, but now I simply ignored her and left as soon as she took the kids upstairs to put them to bed. When she came down, I was gone. It was the end of the week when Chris came into the break room and sat down. He handed me a folder. I looked up questioningly at Chris, but he only shook his head. I opened the folder and read the brief report. It was 2 sheets of paper with a single name on the top of each page, David Peterson. That was his name, and he was a junior attorney at Mitchell, Rice, and Holmes Attorneys. He was 30, almost 5 years younger than me, and he was single. His wife had divorced him over 2 years before, and he was supposed to have money. He lived in a condo apartment, and Laura had been there twice this week. She arrived early in the afternoon and she stayed for an hour or longer each time. So now I had a name and an address. Now I knew who the man was and something about him. What I didn't know was what Laura saw in him that she didn't see in me. What he had that was worth throwing away a marriage for her. But that was not my problem now. It would have been if she had come to me earlier and told me of the affair, but not as a fact that I was supposed to accept without question. Okay, now what? What do I have to do to set this in motion? I looked at Chris for guidance. Chris seemed to be the one who was in charge, even though it was me that was the one with the problem. It was fortunate for me that I had friends and a brother like Chris. It seems that being a good guy and working hard at my job was enough for my real friends, and I needed them now more than ever. It's already in motion. The first lesson is due tonight. They'll call you at home when it's done. Just be sure you have your cell with you. Once I call, you can let her know and end this, okay? Knowing it was done brought no satisfaction. This was not the way I wished it could be handled, but Laura and her lover had forced me into a corner, and now I was fighting the only way I could. I wasn't a lawyer or a doctor or someone smart enough to come up with a sophisticated plan. I was a mechanic, someone who worked hard with his hands, someone who did his best for his family. Hard, honest work, pride in his ability to provide for those he loved, and I had loved Laura with all my heart. But my wife wasn't satisfied with that. Well, so be it. My plan was consistent with my world, and she would see that very soon. I went home as usual and sat with my family at dinner like nothing was wrong. Laura chatted to the kids, and I answered when asked a question and actually initiated some discussions. I was nervous but resigned. After dinner, I spent time with the kids, actually playing some video games with them and helping them with their homework. Typical husband and father. Laura finished the dishes and came in to watch. She seemed more relaxed tonight since I seemed to be more like my old self. She was beginning to think it would be okay. As Ryan was playing video games with his boys, David Peterson was just leaving his office building, heading toward his car for the drive to his apartment across town. He was thinking to himself how wild Laura had been when they met 2 days ago in his pad. She was hot for him and wanted to screw his brains out. When he asked her what the occasion was after they had showered, she said her husband had found out. He was shocked, but she said not to worry. Strange, he thought, knowing that her husband knew what she was doing turned her into a real 304. Better sex for him, so what did he care? As he passed an alley on the way to the lot where he parked, he felt a shove, and he staggered sideways into the alley. As he entered, trying to avoid falling, someone grabbed his arms and pulled. He stumbled down the alley toward the courtyard at the end. He was pushed against the wall of a building and held there by 2 men, one on each side. He tried to see their faces, but they had on black ski masks. Both were big, however, and he began to be afraid. He had no money, and he didn't wear an expensive watch, so what the hell did they want? A third man stood in front of him, also dressed in a ski mask and gloves. He put one huge hand under David's chin and lifted his face up. A deep voice asked, "Do you know a woman named Laura Marshall?" At the name, David suddenly felt a cold chill shoot up his back. Oh, Jesus Christ, is that what this was about? Her effing wimp husband? She never told him he was this big. No, I don't know anyone by that name. He was shaking but had to try to deny everything. The big man hit him in the ribs, resulting in a pain so severe he gasped for breath. He saw stars spinning in front of him. The pain was intense and scared him badly. I'll ask you again. Do you know a woman named Laura Marshall? Lying was not going to work, so David stopped. Yes, I know her. Please God, let me get out of this alive, he thought. You will never see her or talk to her again. Do you understand me? The big man waited for his answer. I hear you. Okay, maybe this was just a warning. Okay, he could take that. I want to be sure you understand that my friends and I aren't convinced that a guy like you, who screws other men's wives, is very smart. So we're going to make sure you do understand. With that, he was forced to stand up and away from the wall. As he tried to get his balance, the first blow hit him in the solar plexus and he folded up. He wasn't allowed to fall, however, and the next blow was in the ribs. He felt the snap and knew the rib was broken. The next blow fractured his jaw, and the pain almost drove him under. He felt the next few blows, but after that, he was blessedly unconscious. They must have continued to pound on him until they finally stopped. They slapped him into consciousness again and told him what they wanted him to remember. They repeated it over and over. He remembered nothing more until he woke up in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. His injuries were not life-threatening, but the hospital admitted him to general care. He was heavily sedated and in some pain, but he was not seriously injured. He said a small prayer for that. They told him she would probably call him there and was told exactly what he was to say. He remembered the words clearly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Marshall. It was my mistake, and I regret it. He'll never see you or speak to you again. He'll have no contact with you or your children. I'm sorry I ever met you. Goodbye. David fell back against the bed and waited for her call. He repeated the words over and over in his head so he wouldn't get them wrong. They told him they would know and he would pay the price. He said them silently to himself again, just to be sure. He told himself that he would never again make a move on a married woman, regardless of who or where she was. My cell phone rang just after 8 p.m. as I was playing with the twins, and I excused myself to take it in the other room. I flipped it open when I saw the caller ID display Chris. I listened to the simple message. It's done. Lesson 1 delivered. He's been admitted at Memorial. Then the phone went dead. I closed the phone and went back into the family room with a smile on my face. Laura noticed but didn't say anything. She did smile, however, believing it was good news. Finally, Laura took the kids upstairs and looked at me in question. "They'll be here when you come back down." She smiled widely and then went up to put the kids down. I went into the family room, sat down in my chair, and waited. Now it began. Payback. Laura came in with a pot of coffee and 2 cups. "I thought we could talk some more. You seem more resigned to the way things are. I'm so glad. I was afraid I was going to lose you, and that would have broken my heart. I know you don't believe me, but I love you so much. I can't lose you, not for something like this. It's so trivial compared to what we have. You have to know that." I watched her as she talked. She was still beautiful to me. After all, this was the woman I had loved for so long. I had planned on spending the rest of my life with her, growing old together. They were plans, dreams, now all ashes. Well, let the end begin now. "Laura, I have to tell you something, and I want you to listen very carefully. I know your lover is David Peterson, and he is a junior lawyer for Mitchell, Rice, and Holmes. I know all about him, and I know you've seen him even twice more this week." Laura was surprised and seemed like she wanted to say something, but I waved her to silence. "Erase the thing. You threatened me with divorce when I expressed my anger. You threatened to take away all the things I have. I remember your words exactly. They are burned into my brain. You said, 'I will take everything you have.' You said more, but those were the words I remember. Those were the words of contempt that destroyed our marriage. Those were the words that were intended to push me into that corner where I had no options left but to let you put yourself out to another man while I stood by and watched. I told you the next night that cornered rats fight back." Now I saw the first sign of fear and pain on her face. She had no idea of what was coming, but she was smart enough to know it was not going to be something she liked. Her shoulders rose and her head ducked down in an instinctive protection. "I know that you told Rachel that I never made you feel the way he did and that you were his 304. I'm sorry that it has to end since you enjoyed it so much, but Mr. Peterson has been told in no uncertain terms that his time with you is over. He is never to see you again. Never. He has also been instructed that he is never to speak to my boys. He has agreed." I watched the shock and disbelief on her face as I continued. "I will file for divorce, but there will be no alimony. I'm filing on the basis of infidelity. Even though we have a no-fault state, I can still file with reason. I have the proof now, so there is no question of your guilt. There will be child support. My sons will not want for anything as long as you take care of them. I will see you have the means. You will have to work, however, if you want anything else for yourself. I will handle everything so you have nothing to worry about. I'll even pay for the divorce." Laura stood, her face blazing with anger. "You're crazy if you think he'll agree to that, and I will take you to the cleaners just as I told you. Just wait." Laura was frightened but still belligerent. She was going to bluff this through just as she planned. "Why don't you call your Mr. Peterson right now? See what he has to say." "Oh wait, I think you might have to call Memorial Hospital. That call I got earlier told me he was in the emergency room at Memorial. I assume by now he has been admitted. Just call, see. You can use mine. I have the number already plugged in for you." Laura looked at me in horror. "What have you done? What did you do to David?" "Oh my God. Ryan, what did you do?" "Why, Laura, whatever do you mean? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why would you think I've done something? What reason would I have to do anything to your lover? You made it clear to me that I was to stay out of it. It was no concern of mine." I had a look on my face that certainly must have frightened Laura. She had never seen me this way. I was a calm, mild-mannered man who never hurt anyone. I had never even been able to physically discipline the children, leaving that to her. Now she saw me differently. My face was cold and hard, and my eyes were dead. Laura walked into the next room and I heard her on the phone. She must have gotten through because she came back with tears in her eyes. She slumped into the chair and stared off into space. I calmly sat down and picked up the paper. I knew what she heard on the phone. Her lover was in the process of dumping her. It was either that or take a beating every time he saw her. That was a promise made to him by 3 very big men who picked him up as he exited work today. They told him exactly why he was being hassled and what he had to look forward to if he ever saw or spoke with Laura again. They wanted to be sure he understood. Showing him was what put him in the emergency room. Laura wiped her tears, gave a big sigh, looked at me and said, Well, it seems you win. David told me he could never see me again. He said he would have all my things sent back to me. He never wanted to talk to me again. Well, I guess you have nothing to worry about then. Seems you're taken care of. I have my own lawyers, so they will handle everything. It should be over very quickly. I laid the paper down and got up to leave. They'll talk to the boys this weekend. Let them know why we're getting divorced. Maybe they're old enough to understand. If not, they'll grow up and remember. As I walked away, I glanced back to see a very defeated Laura crying. If I remember your words again, Laura, you said that your affair was something that would pass quickly, and then things could get back to the way they were. I laughed a bitter, angry laugh. You're still young and beautiful, Laura. Maybe you can find someone who will put up with your sick fantasies. Someone who wants an open marriage. Someone who will let you screw as many men as you want. Couldn't, but then that's just me. Good luck. Kids don't understand it, but we do. Adults have to live with the consequences of their actions. Thanks for watching. How would you handle this betrayal? Let us know below and subscribe for more stories.